Well, joining me now is Haida Hyde, a Syria researcher and associate fellow at Chatham House think tank. Thanks very much for coming into Al Jazeera. All this talk about these various areas, both Iraq and Syria, now being pushed back, ISIL being pushed out of the way, but we're not saying they've disappeared, are we?
Not exactly, because it happened before. It happened after 2007, 2008, when the Americans established the Sahawat program in Iraq, and they were able to defeat what was called at that time the Islamic State in Iraq. But it came back because the reasons and the root reasons that the root causes that allowed that group to flourish in the first place were not dealt with. And what we are seeing here is a similar situation. They are pushing the group out of the urban areas, but the group will disappear and will continue to pose a threat, not only inside Syria, but elsewhere as well.
We understand now there are vast swathes of the country that various groups now are pushing towards. There's almost a rush to take back control of those areas. We've just had one line drop on agencies. Senior Iranian official Valayati says Syrian government forces and their allies will advance to what they call liberate Syria's Raqqa city in the near future. Now, of course, the Kurdish forces went into Raqqa. Is this basically laying down a line that says there's going to be now yet another battle?
Well, it's not clear, but people basically say statements in the media for different reasons. One is to send a message, but to basically implement those messages on the ground is a different story, because part of at least the unspoken agreement or spoken agreement, we are not clear on what happened behind the closed doors yet. But there is some kind of agreement between the Russians and the Americans on what's happening in the eastern part of Syria. And before the regime or the Iranians or even the Russians will decide to go and take over Raqqa, they have to deal with the Syrian Democratic Forces in the countryside of Deir ez-Zor. So this will be, I think, the first indication in which we will be able to know whether there will be future or near clashes between the regime and the Syrian Democratic Forces.
How important is it to watch very carefully what happens to those populations who've lived under ISIL forces and to see how the Syrian government forces indeed treats them? There is a lot of fear, I know, of these people as to how they're going to be treated.
Exactly, because even before ISIS captured Deir ez-Zor, people there were opposing the regime. So when the regime goes back to those areas, first of all, the regime is angry with those people because they started demonstrating on the streets and kicked the military forces, and then they stayed under ISIS. So the regime will most likely carry out revenge and discriminatory actions against those people. So many left the areas, but the problem is that there is no place for them to go to. Most of the places that are controlled by the Syrian Democratic Forces are basically closed, and they're not allowing those people to cross to those areas, and that's the only way out. So they have no safe place that they can go to and they can be safe at.
And of the ISIL forces who are now looking for another fight, do you get the sense that this is almost an export now that could be heading towards areas in Asia, areas in Africa, where the battle is still ongoing?
I think they are now exploring all their options, but that doesn't mean that they will not continue fighting in Syria and Iraq. They have people there and they have resources, and they will for sure change the format in which they are carrying out their attacks. There will be most likely hit-and-run operations, more suicidal attacks and stuff like that, but they will continue to operate in Syria and Iraq while they are exploring other opportunities as well.
Hyde, thanks very much for coming to see us in Al Jazeera.
Thank you.